thanks for coming down and joining the LCBA podcast, kind of getting to know a little bit more about businesses in Wyoming, the economy, and what's going on in the town and the state. And really appreciate you coming down as the president of WyoTech and telling us what's going on there. But I thought maybe for people that don't know, we'd start with what a history looks like. Sure. Because it's not the last iteration or the iteration before that. The history goes back into the 60s, 70s?
Yeah, 1966. So, happy first. Thanks for having me here, and it's always good to talk to you. And happy to talk about the history of WyoTech and all that good stuff. So, WyoTech started in 1966.
Holy smokes!
Right here in Laramie. So, going on 60 years now. Real close to 60 years that WyoTech's been around, and really just started as kind of a dream of a couple of the original owners of seeing a need and saying, hey, the industry needs some training here. And so actually started over in West Laramie where the woodworking shop is now.
I did know that.
Yeah, that was the original WyoTech. Had 15, 20 students or something that started in 1966. And so it grew up slowly over time and kind of stabilized in the 80s, 90s at about 400 or 500 students, and it was that's kind of what it was for a while, and nobody really saw it being much more, and so kind of the history of where things get exciting starts when Jim Mathis came back in the fold and kind of worked his way up through different channels. Jim Mathis was our current owner, and he came to WyoTech as a student in 1976.
Yep.
So he always says, I didn't get there right when it started, but I got there as quick as I can. And so he'd been there for about 10 years after, and then he immediately after he graduated begged, borrowed, and stole his way back into teaching at WyoTech. He found that was his thing. He had a passion for it, a love for it, and so he started teaching at WyoTech right after he graduated and worked his way up into several different roles until he kind of oversaw the growth of WyoTech in the late 90s. And so under Jim's leadership, WyoTech grew from that campus of 400 or 500 students to a campus that had 2,000 students by the early 2000s.
So were you guys going around the clock at that point?
So at that point, WyoTech was around the clock and all across town. So the North Campus was kind of the main hub out there on the highway, and then there were buildings in West Laramie where Murdoch's is currently was entirely filled with our business management program.
Holy smokes.
The satellite shop for Laramie GM was one of our shops, and so there was WyoTech all over the place and a night shift, and so students were going not only from 7 to 4:15, but from 4:30 until about 2 in the morning.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. And so at that point, as WyoTech was kind of maxed out and growing, started to attract investors and different parties that wanted to get involved with the growth. And so WyoTech expanded into a Blairsville, Pennsylvania campus. There was a Sacramento campus. There was a Florida campus. There was a campus in the Northeast, and campuses all over the place. And eventually, WyoTech had a max of about, I think, 7,000 students at one time across the country.
I remember I was traveling once and there was a WyoTech ad, like come to WyoTech, and I was like, that's cool, bridging out from Laramie.
Yeah.
And then, but it was for, I think, the Blairsville campus in Pennsylvania. I think I was in Western Pennsylvania. I'm working in the pharmaceutical industry when they had that. And I was like, well, I didn't know that.
Yeah. An interesting thing that a lot of people don't know, but, WyoTech was originally Wyoming Technical Institute, Wyoming Tech, and when it was officially shortened to WyoTech was when it was branched out into these other states, because even though WyoTech is still clearly referring to Wyoming, it's a little bit more natural to have a WyoTech someplace else than a Wyoming Technical Institute.
I never knew that. I didn't realize, because even when I was in college here, it was the WyoTech kids.
Yep.
Right, and the Great Divide, which we'll talk about a little bit later, because your team has really done a job of integrating not only your professional staff into the community, but also the students. We never have a day where we say we need some volunteers and we don't have somebody from WyoTech and your students raise their hand first.
Yeah,
So
we'll
talk about
to hear
that through that, because it's a unique change and shift that I don't know if people note enough, or kind of go, oh, it's been a real good, like, this has been done conscientiously.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so as it kind of grew, and then it was everywhere, and then I know there was like the Corinthian career colleges, and then somebody else owned it.
Yeah.
But you do come back to this point, and that's not that part of the past isn't, it's more the historic past, and the current is where I want to focus, because that's really, it grew from this and it's now this.
Yeah.
But we had all that. Talk a little bit about when the kind of investor colleges pulled out, and it goes back to a handful of students, the state saying, we got to do something, this is too important to Wyoming.
Yeah.
And Jim and his group coming back in that iteration, because it was bleak.
Yeah.
I was involved in a little bit of that when it was going on. It was bleak.
Yeah, it was bleak for sure. And so like you said, as WyoTech got bigger, one of the companies that owned WyoTech was Corinthian Colleges, and Corinthian Colleges ran into some hot water for a lot of different reasons that we could spend another podcast talking about.
Which we probably should, just in terms of higher education financing being so important for our community.
Yeah, there's a lot of
the right way and the wrong way.
Yep, there's a lot of interesting things that led to that. But anyway, none of it really ever involved WyoTech, and certainly none of it ever involved WyoTech in Laramie. But as Corinthian Colleges went out of business, they went from a portfolio of 200 plus schools to 50 schools that were salvaged by this other group called Zenith Education Group.
Right.
And so Zenith Education Group immediately taught out 25 of those schools, meaning that they just taught the students to their graduation that were in there, and then shut the doors. And then they kind of pledged to run 25 other campuses. And so WyoTech in Laramie was one of those campuses. And it became clear pretty quickly that Zenith Education Group, they were struggling to run schools. It was kind of a side project. It was something, as crazy as it sounds, they were a kind of subdivision of Education Credit Management Corporation, which is a huge student loan guarantor. And so, this was an entity that they created just to run these schools. And so,
oh, no kidding, I didn't realize that.
Yep, even though that's a lot of money to run 25 schools, it was still just kind of this side pet project. And so 2-3 years into this project, they had dumped a ton of money into these schools and done some good faith things,
right.
Put some good equipment, put some things, but the bottom line wasn't there. They weren't making money, they weren't able to recruit as effectively, and so these schools were just losing a lot of money. And so at that point, they just wiped their hands and said, all 25 of these schools, we are going to teach out.
Yeah.
And so we're going to walk away. And they had, millions and millions and millions of dollars of leases and all these things that were attached to that, including here in Laramie. They
Right.
had multi-million-dollar worth of leases that, again, they were just going to walk away from, not put it up for sale, not do any due diligence, but just say, we're done with this.
Yeah.
We're done with our project, and walk away. And so at that point, that's kind of where you're talking about is the employees of WyoTech were basically told, you're going to teach out these students, so within 6-9 months,
Right.
the campus is closed, and none of you have jobs, and there's no more training for students, and there's no more employees for industry, and it just goes away. And so it was a really unique and interesting place for us to be, because it was a total gut punch at that point.
Yeah.
But as soon as we started picking up the phone, at the time the campus president was Caleb Perriton,
Yeah.
and Caleb picked up the phone, and he got in a hold of the governor and all these different people in Wyoming, and all of the state leaders. That's why it was this simultaneous kind of gut punch and kind of a warm fuzzy feeling at the same time, because everybody that we picked up the phone and talked to was like, okay, what do we need to do? How
Yeah.
can we help? How can we save this place?
Yeah, I got a call from, I think it was Tim Stampus who called me first and said, hey, we got a problem, and I didn't even know it was going on. And I was like, yeah, like, certainly willing to start making calls to people I know in DC. You know, have you talked to my dad? Have you, and I mean, but I didn't have, you know, I was living in Cheyenne, didn't have anything to do with Laramie at that point. I was just
Yeah.
big fan of kind of the WyoTech culture
Yeah.
and the cars and the cool stuff. So
Yeah, and so people like yourself, people like you know, the city council. I think the mayor at the time was Andy Somerville. She was at the table, and you know, all these different people, up to including the university president, the president of LCCC, Joe
yeah,
Schaefer.
I know Joe was brand new.
Yeah,
Like he'd been there maybe a year at that point.
yeah, and here he is. He's got an automotive program.
Yeah.
He's got a diesel program. But I mean, a testament to the community, to the state, to everybody. He's at the front of the table saying, "Okay, I've got a person who will help you run projections, run numbers, like make calls." We put a committee together, a group basically that met on a regular basis. I'm like, okay, what would this look like if this became part of the junior college system? If it went to a private entity? Basically, just what would it look like to be able to save WyoTech in one form or another?
Yeah.
And so, you know, through these meetings, again, it's like it's a race against time. You can't recruit students at this time. People are losing their jobs. You know,
Right.
slowly less and less people are employed, and all the while, it's like, okay, let's at least give ourselves a chance.
Yeah.
And so at that point, it was even the Zenith Education Group had said they weren't going to sell it.
Yeah.
They just weren't. And so we first had to start even just to get them
So you even had to
open
like
to the idea of
negotiate
entertaining an offer.
right to buy.
Yeah. And
That's nuts.
yeah, it was crazy. And so, you know, as we worked through that process, ultimately what happened was the state legislature stepped up and said, okay, we get it, we see it, this is kind of an institution, this is important to our community, to our city, to our state. And so they approved a pool of $5 million that was either going to go as a grant to have WyoTech kind of become part of the junior college system, maybe incorporated with
Right.
LCCC, or eventually they came up with another path, which was this could be a loan to a private business person that would
Right.
run this as a private school.
But I know like Jim, when he left, he left at the Corinthian, maybe was there for a minute after Corinthian bought. But then he became like a consultant to
Yeah.
schools around the country. So he, you know, was sharp at what he'd done at WyoTech, and then went and, you know, iron sharpens iron, went and did this around the country. I think that's a really interesting part of the WyoTech story, because the expertise that left comes back even sharper.
Yeah, great point, and good time to talk about kind of the history of Jim Mathis, again, the current owner, and where he kind of exited and came back. But exactly right, when we're talking about Corinthian colleges came in, and you know, was part of the big growth of WyoTech in terms of opening different campuses and things like that, but also part of the downfall is, you know, they went out of business. But when Corinthian colleges came in, Jim Mathis was the president, and he decided, you know, that was an opportunity. They didn't see eye to eye in all areas, and you know, he had done a lot for the school, and you know, that's an opportunity for him to kind of exit out and let them do their thing and him do his thing. And so, you know, Jim went and he bought a cattle ranch near Wheatland, and was messing around with that, and then started fielding a bunch of phone calls, because Jim built up a name for himself in the industry.
Right.
Hey, you're the guy that took this school from 500 to 2,000 students, and you know, and you get it. Like your admissions, marketing, quality education, quality training, like all of those things were earmarks of Jim Mathis. And so as he's out there on his cattle ranch, he starts to field phone calls from other people. Hey, my school, I own a school and it's going under. You're the guy.
Right.
Come help turn this around for us. And so, like you mentioned there, in the time that between Jim left in the early 2000s, when he left WyoTech, And then in 2018, when this new version of WyoTech kind of rose up from the ashes, Jim was out there doing turnarounds with other schools, taking schools that were close to closure, close to bankruptcy, that had kind of lost their way, and taking them back to the basics of how to run an operation, and then building that up into a successful business and a successful school. And so Jim was out there, like you said, he built WyoTech, he kind of, mastered that and figured out the growth path. And then he went out there and learned a lot of different things in a lot of different schools that do it different ways, and said, hey, a lot of what we did at WyoTech is kind of the way that you should do it.
Yeah.
And then, learned other things along the way. And then when this opportunity arose, there he was ready to kind of pounce and bring all those lessons back to his baby, kind of, which was WyoTech.
Yeah.
So
I think one of the cool things in that, when you're talking about gyms, is always culture. How are we gonna? And that was one of the things I know from talking to your leadership team, and as we've had different groups that come in, because it is something that I don't think people realize, the amount of people that come in to look at WyoTech, not only from, every hotel sold out when you guys have career fair, every hotel sold out at registration and graduation.
Yeah.
And so there's 3 nights per cycle. So every three months we have at least 3 nights that are booked from that.
we have a graduation coming up next Friday. We have 460 graduates, and we have 3,200 guests RSVP'd for
Holy smokes!
that one night.
That's up from the one I did a while ago.
Yeah, it'll be our biggest
I
one.
mean, that was double. That's double that.
Yeah,
So I think we
2
were around
ceremonies.
200.
We have 2 ceremonies with 200 plus graduates each, and approximately 15 to 1,700 guests each.
That's awesome. Because it is an impressive thing to see, and the kids, and they come and they have, and this kind of plays into that culture when you go to the graduation, and they've got different tassels for different things, but the one that really impressed me is and you get to sit front row and you get your diploma first if you have the
Eagle Tech,
and that's perfect attendance.
Yeah.
Right, the things that fit into perfect attendance, and I think as I was getting familiar with the school and out there a bunch, they get the pin, right? There's a pin to
get a perfect attendance pin for every 6 weeks that you have perfect attendance.
And I start noticing those things, but it was the culture of that, and then I I think I asked you first, I'm like, what is perfect attendance? And it's every hour for 8 hours a day for the entire 6 weeks.
Yeah, so our classes are broken into 6-week segments, and so every pin is for 6 weeks, but a 9-month program consists of 1,440 hours of training, and so to have perfect attendance, that means that you didn't miss a single minute or hour of 1,440 hours of training, and we take attendance every hour,
right,
of every day, 8 times a day.
And then people wonder why everybody, why that career fair is sold out. It's because the kids know how to work.
Yeah.
Right. It's ingrained into this culture, and one of the things I think that you guys always talk about that I love is it's going to be best.
Yeah.
So why don't you let's talk about that culture of the best education, the best experience. Best.
The vision that we have out at WyoTech is super simple, and most our employees that you talk to can spout it off for you right off the bat, but it's best training, period, best experience, period, best outcomes, period. And so we want to grow, we want to do things the right way, but we always have those 3 things kind of in the back of our mind, or as a guiding light that directs us. And so if we're talking about a new program, if we're talking about new facilities, if we're talking about expansion, if we're talking about new partnerships, we're always thinking, is that part of offering the best training? As simple as that. Is that part of offering the best experience? Simple as that. Is that part of offering the best outcomes? Simple as that. And so the career fairs that you reference, that's part of best outcomes. If somebody comes and like you mentioned, if our students are coming from all across the country, everywhere. We typically have 20 or 30 students from Hawaii at a given time. We have students from the East Coast, from the South, all over the place. And so these students are making a commitment to come from wherever it is they're coming from, to travel across the country to Laramie, Wyoming. And then we have a professionalism code, so they're getting in uniform, they're shaving,
Yep.
they're cutting their hair, they're showing up on time every day, and if they don't, they get kicked out.
Yeah.
And it sounds harsh sometimes. If you miss 3 days, you're gone. But it's also part of the promise that we make to them and to the industry, is that if somebody comes through this program, they committed to it, they showed up every day, they worked hard, and if they didn't maintain that standard, then they didn't do what's needed to make it through the program.
Yeah.
And so we'll welcome them back. We'll work with them to
figure it out. I've heard
redo
those
it.
conversations a few times when I've been over.
Yeah, and get it done eventually. But if you don't meet the standard, you don't pass and you don't graduate, and you got to go think about it. And so again, that's part of best outcomes, but it's also part of best experience, because we're not here to just put a rubber stamp on a bunch of people and then not have them go out and deliver for the industry
Right.
like they need them to.
And I think it gets lost, right? In modern business, we and I always look at how my kids went through school, and I'm like, you can redo that assignment how many times?
As many as you want.
And you're not? Like, what are we doing here? And really, the cultures that I see excelling right now are the ones that say, this is the standard, come meet it.
Yeah.
And I think the extra incredible thing that I watch with your students and with my kids is when somebody clearly projects what that standard is, and it's a known entity, they rise to it.
Yeah.
You guys don't have a lot of kids that don't show up.
Yeah.
Right.
We graduate in the upper 80% of our students, and we place in the upper 80% of our students in the industry. So.
And I think even when COVID went on, and you guys worked out a program to be the first live instruction, but even during that, when people were getting sick and kids weren't able to come, there was a program, and you guys were still in the high 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really incredible when you think about a culture and what people are trying to get out of it. And I do think, from an industry perspective, when I talk to the companies that you guys have in, and I try to get over to the career fairs, is they're there for a reason. It's a known entity.
Yeah.
And so that's another part. And talk a little bit about it's not just the kids that come from all over the country, it's companies.
Yeah, totally. I mean, and again, that's a big part of it. So you mentioned before these career fairs, but every 3 months we'll do a career fair, and we typically carve out about 105 spots, whatever that is. But I mean, it fills up a big portion of our one of our large shops, and so
Yeah.
we cap that out for space. We cap it out, for you just don't want to have too many employers for a graduating class of 100 students or something. But typically it's going to be 100 employers, and we will open the registration for the career fair a couple months in advance, and it opens at midnight. And typically, by the time our career services staff gets into the office at 8 a.m. or whenever they're there, it's full.
Yeah.
And we literally will have people that set their alarm for 12:01
Yeah.
to make sure that they can register and get into the career fair. And so they're paying their own way. They're coming from all across the country, and so we've got obviously diesel employers, we've got automotive, we've got collision, we've got some of the specialty programs, and we have employers that are there very regularly, and we have your onesies and twosies that will come occasionally. But what we find and what we see with the employers is the ones who are serious about it, the ones who really get it, they understand that it's a competition for them too. And so they're coming back, like you mentioned, because they've seen some of those standards, and they've had some experience with some of those graduates, and oftentimes, again, what they'll tell you is, I know that if a student will relocate here to Laramie, Wyoming from Hawaii or Delaware or Colorado or Nebraska or wherever it is, and do that for 9 months, and they'll shave, and they'll cut their hair, and they'll wear a uniform, they'll show up every day, and they'll do all of the things that you guys asked them to. That level of commitment says enough right off the bat. Like they wanted this so bad that they would sacrifice those things to come have the experience here in Laramie and say, hey, I'm willing to uphold all of those standards. And so even we'll have plenty of industry. We require our students to be clean shaven. You'll be sitting across from somebody who's got a full beard that works at the shop that's hiring a student, and you ask them, well, what do you think about that shaving policy? And they're like, we love it, because if they'll do that while they're here, I'm not going to ask them to shave at my shop, but whatever rules I've got, whatever standards I've got, I know that they're the kind of person that's going to commit to that, follow through with that, and work hard for me, basically. And so, you start to see the industry that gets it. They're coming through with, they're donating equipment, they're offering tuition reimbursements or relocation packages or buying tools or a lot of different things. Like, what can we do to be that employer that students are saying, hey, I want to go work for those guys. And so you get a lot of those industry partners that really get that, and we're so grateful for those partnerships, because again, they get it and they see it and they try to fuel that and say, hey, we like what you guys are doing over there. We like the students that are coming out over there.
Yeah.
So how can we keep that engaged, and how can we help the momentum there?
Yeah,
So.
I can see it, and I've gone to dinner when you guys have a new corporate partner coming in. You guys are kind enough to invite me. I don't know what I add to it a lot of times, because I'm like, I don't even know what they just talked about. But it is interesting to hear them trying to crack that nut. Like, it really is a remarkable thing to see a workforce that's in such demand, and part of it is just the general demand in our country, but these kids are in a higher demand in this sector, and so the competition for them also becomes a competition of how do I participate.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we miss locally and certainly at the state level, because people say, well, how many kids do you guys have stick around?
Yeah.
And I remember your stat is like 97% come from out of here, and they go back to where?
93%.
93,
Yeah.
and we have 7% Wyoming kids, and Wyoming kids typically stick around here, although I just heard Maddie in our office, her friend came here from Cheyenne and got a job offer was too good in Nebraska to pass up, so that happens. But when we talk about how do you grow, because you guys are always trying to help the community grow and trying to participate, but when we talk about how do you make that workforce grow, we also have to get the companies in Wyoming and the region to understand that it's competitive.
Yeah.
And the answer can't be, well, the reason I do business in Wyoming is because I can pay people less.
Yeah.
Right? That math doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, not yeah. When we've got, in our case, 1,000 students, to me, I see that as a big opportunity for Laramie or for Wyoming or for the region. It's like, hey, we've got this group of students who saw value in relocating to Wyoming, and so there's at least some part of there in there that I think would be open to, hey, I'll stick around. If it's the best opportunity, I'll stick around. I'll work in this place, and we see that enough times too, even with people who relocated here and have no connection to Wyoming, and they fall in love with Laramie, or they meet their significant other or whatever.
Right.
This town is littered with Wyoming WyoTech graduates and UW graduates that came from other places and stuck around. So the opportunity is obviously there, and you're right. It's a competition, and it's what are we doing as a community, as a state, or in the case that we're talking about as industry, to make sure that I'm the one that they notice. And so a really good example of that is a partnership that we have with Waste Connections.
Yeah, this is a great program. I love this one, and it makes it tougher, but like that's where as a business community we have to raise our bar.
Yeah.
And let's talk about how Waste Connections said these kids are so great, and we've got parents working here and now kids that are WyoTech grads, and so they just converted that to a whole program because they knew it worked.
Yeah, so Waste Connections, if anybody's not familiar, is a great company, a huge company. I think 30,000 employees or something like that, and $1 billion revenue type of a company. But they're one of the large companies out there that's taken away all of our garbage. They're taking
Right.
our trash from the front of our house, and they take it to the landfills, and they have a whole operation that's all across the country. So Waste Connections was a group that came to some career fairs, hired some students, and shortly thereafter they just had it was a culture fit. Like
Yep.
they met some of us, they met our students, they had really good success with what was going on. The owner of Waste Connections met with Jim Mathis, our owner, and just again, a culture fit, like people that see the world in a very similar way, organizations that operate in a very similar way.
Yeah.
We had an opportunity when we were kind of first starting this partnership with Waste Connections. They flew a private jet into Laramie, and they took some of our leadership team, and we toured 3 different Waste Connections sites, landfill and a couple of the shops in one day, and then they flew us back into Laramie, Wyoming. But every shop that we went to, they said the same thing. Like, our goal is to grow our people. We want good people in here, and then I want to do enough that Jimmy or Sally or whoever is ready to go on to bigger and better things, even if that
Right.
means leaving my shop. As long as it's within our company and it's a growth opportunity for them, and everybody is going to work itself out. And that spoke to us because we think
That's
the
what
same thing.
you're in the business of, right?
Yeah.
Like
growing students and growing our employees too.
Better opportunities, and
that's what.
And I have seen your employees go around town, but it's that growth.
Yeah.
So you get that aligned, and they say, "We're going big."
Yeah. So they're like, "What can we do? Can we do a tuition reimbursement? Yeah, you can, but other people do that too. Can we do a tool allowance? Yeah, you can, but other people do that too." And on down the line, and so eventually, after several iterations, they settled on, if you're one of our, however many that is, 30,000 employees, and you have a dependent that would be willing to come back and work for Waste Connections for at least 2 years, then if they go to WyoTech and WyoTech only, we will pay for the entirety of their tuition, entirety of their housing, and guarantee them employment for 2 years at Waste Connections after they graduate.
I mean, I can't even imagine. That's like getting a trustee scholarship to the university,
Yeah,
plus a job offer,
Yeah.
and they pay well.
they pay well. It's a
So,
great company. Yeah.
I mean, you're guaranteed 2 years of wages. You get to go to school for free. You got to trade for your life,
Right.
and that's the commitment they make to really not only to WyoTech and to the students, but they make to our community.
Yeah, and I mean, to go along with that, they hired a recruiter whose entire job is to recruit WyoTech students. So
No kidding.
Yeah, he helps.
I didn't know this part.
Yeah, he runs the program to try to find the students from employees. But then he's also, in addition, they know they're going to get those graduates to go back and work. In addition, his full job is to find as many other WyoTech students as he can to recruit as well.
That's incredible. And you think about that competition for good workers.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we talk about creating in my role in particular, we talk about creating the jobs that people want. And that WyoTech culture is really, we create the people that everybody else wants.
Yeah.
And I think that's a mind shift that sets you guys apart in not only your space in the marketplace, but really in, the education sphere.
Yeah, and like you said, I think a big part of that too, again, is the standard setting and letting people rise to that challenge, and identifying people who are willing to rise to that challenge, and
Yeah.
not trying to force somebody who has no interest, or just be all things to all people.
Yeah.
that is gonna end up in a failure. It's identifying people who will raise their hand and say, yeah, I want to meet that standard. That's
I think one of the cool things I see when I'm out on campus, and we'll be touring through, there's the obvious stuff, right? Meet a student, guy or girl, firm handshake, look you in the eye. I mean, it's just straightforward. It's. I hate to use that. Now I feel like I'm getting old. That's how I was raised. But you see that. But then you also see the kids huddling around the kids that are kind of. You can tell they're having a tough time. They're falling behind. But it's the kids that are bringing, pulling up to the standard.
Yeah.
And you can watch it, and it's not. You think it would be like, oh, come on, you slack it. No, it's like, hey, how can I help you? And I've heard those conversations in your halls. Like, hey, I know that was tough today for you. How let's get together tonight and we'll go over it.
Yeah.
And that's, you see it from the instructors, but when you see it as the culture of the student body, it's really, really impressive.
Yeah. I mean, it's a brotherhood. It's a sisterhood. Again, we have students from all over the country. We're on a quarterly cycle, so we have a graduation and registration every 3 months. A new group of students coming in every 3 months, and so in a lot of ways, we're kind of like a perpetual freshman class, just like a constant new freshman class. But these students are coming in from all different geographies, all different backgrounds, all different cultures, all different everything. But they come to WyoTech with a common passion, which is I want to work with my hands, I want to build things, I want to create things, I want to make things go fast, but I want to work with my hands, and I love transportation trades, and we do it every time at orientation. We'll have the students raise their hand and say, okay, who's here from a place that's bigger than Laramie? And you
just not a single hand.
No,
that doesn't go up.
That you would think you get half the hands that go up in the air, and they think the exact same thing. They look around and they're like, whose hand is down right now?
Yeah.
And so you get your people from Chicago and Houston and major metro areas, and they're like, this is the tiniest little podunk town I've ever seen. There's nothing to do here. This is crazy. But then you say, okay, you guys put your hands down. Now everybody that's from a town that's smaller than Laramie, you put yours up. The other half go up.
Yeah.
And so you've got people that are from a town of 10, people that are from a town of 500, from 1,000, 10,000, and so on the one side you've got these people who are like, there's no Wrigley Field here, there's no concert every night. What am I gonna do? And then on the other side you got somebody that's like, there's a theater in this town and a Walmart. It's crazy.
Walmart.
It's amazing. And so, they're so different, but they're bonded by, like, they're here because whether they're from Houston or from the town of 5 people, their passion is similar. They're here for the same reasons, and they have, for the most part, the same work ethic and aspirations and things like that. And so it becomes that brotherhood and sisterhood of, like, here we are in Laramie, Wyoming, and but we're in this together. Yeah.
Before we go to, like, the future, I think that best outcomes, best experience we've kind of covered, best education. But when we talk about best outcomes, and I don't know if this is out, and we'll just delete it out of the deal, but I always like seeing your past students that are now kind of experts. You've got the guy who does John Deere, podcaster. I've met several ladies that are now, I mean, they're internet phenoms. I look and they've got like over 1 million followers, and they're doing cool stuff. But the one that really jumped out at me that I saw recently is Ferrari's top mechanic. I think that standard and setting it, but when you look at outcomes, it's not outcomes that just impact, how I feed my family, how I do. You've got a bunch of students that I know of and now follow, that are out in the world impacting the view of trades, impacting a standard of excellence, impacting. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, great point. So 3 years ago, we started the WyoTech Hall of Fame, and so we've known this for a long time, but we have over 60,000 graduates out there, and like you're saying, there's some high profile success stories.
That's
there's
crazy.
TV stars and social media stars and custom car builders winning awards and all those things, but also there's people that went back to a small town and opened, you know, the best collision shop in town right
Yep.
for 20 years, or there's people that went to be a regional manager, or like you said, there's people that maybe are the first time that anybody in their family has graduated any kind of a college, and this is kind of a generation altering education that,
Yeah.
that links them into a trade that builds, you know, a career that really is meaningful that they haven't been in. And so we've got all of that spectrum covered in terms of the success stories. But the Hall of Fame is an opportunity for us to go out and look at those 60,000 graduates and say, okay, you know, every year we're going to highlight 6, 7, 8 of these who are just like killing it out there that
Yeah.
that we love to see. And so we can talk about Nick.
Yeah.
That we just put a press release out, and we actually are just in process of announcing our Hall of Fame class for this year. But Nick Martinson will be in the Hall of Fame class for this year, and yeah, he graduated from WyoTech. He went on to work for BMW for several years, and then from BMW he linked into Ferrari. And when he got to Ferrari, he tells a great story. Maybe we can post the link up somewhere
Yeah,
that,
that'd be
that
cool
people
to
that are
have it
listening
on
to this can
Yeah.
check it out. But he tells a great story. He went to Ferrari and he saw that they have this Ferrari of the Year technician competition that happens in Italy. And so he said, you know, that's my goal. I want to get there. I want to get there. I want to win it. And so, you know, 2-3 years into his Ferrari career, he has a chance to go compete in this competition, and he wins it. So he wins Ferrari Technician of the Year. Again, he tells a great story of how he's there, and he's got all this pride in blue collar, working with your hands and being a tradesman and blue collar. But he also said, you know, hey, I was there. I was going to get myself a custom Italian tailored suit, and so as he did that, in the collar of this suit, he had blue collar, embroidered in the collar of the suit.
I love that part.
A little jab, you know, a little fun there. Like, hey, this is
Still blue collar.
a blue collar, but it's got double meaning, you know, now. And so, just great guy with great success. After winning Ferrari Technician of the Year, he had an opportunity to go work for Blue Origin, which is Jeff Bezos' rocket company.
Spaceships now.
Yeah, so now he's building rocket engines, literally, working on spaceships, and he oversees groups that do engine development for rocket ships. And so again, if we can share this video link, you can kind of
I'd
see
love
him.
to share that video. It's so impactful because I love that part where he's blue collar and then I'm doing rocket ships.
Yeah.
And you just think about, you know, when he showed up here, because I'd guess he's probably about my age.
Yeah.
So probably showed up here in the 90s, right? The kind of segregation of the town from WyoTech, and you know, it was a different deal, and went on to do, you know, that's incredible stuff. F1 started last night with, you know, FP1 practice for the Melbourne deal, and I'm watching Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari, and all I'm thinking about is Nick.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's so cool.
Yeah, and he was a guy from a rural town, basically, that, you know, his high school shop teacher, I believe, had heard of, you know, WyoTech, and a WyoTech presenter came through, and so, you know, he heard about it through that, and he had worked on projects with his dad in his shop, and so he came from those origins, you know, just very, very humble, you know, again, blue collar background, came and he did the work, you know, he raised himself to the standard, he held himself to that level, and, you know, he took what he learned here and just kept building and building and building. I mean, it's amazing to see what they can accomplish with a few opportunities and some good quality training.
I think that's one of the cool things about your kind of core group, right? One of the stats that I always kind of hang my hat on is your core group of instructors and leadership kind of average in the 20 plus year category, so they've been there 20 years, but they also all say, and we're going to be here another 20. which you don't see generally. But that kind of core, really, in watching them interact with the students, is this is a lifelong passion.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not geared for the 9 months you're here. It's not geared for is they're building in that passion over time. And Nick's is a great story. Like the John Deere, and I can't remember what his deal is, but I watch it on YouTube because he goes and fixes farm equipment.
Yeah.
Which I would know nothing about had I not met him at a graduation. But they're all constantly building on, and I think that's another culture element that you guys have built in that makes your students so in demand.
Yeah, and I mean the cool thing is a lot of the instructors and the staff that you're talking about, a lot of them are alumni. So they came here, again, on average, not from Wyoming. They relocated here, came to school, went out and worked in the industry, and then kind of heard that calling of like, I want to give back, and that was the place that did it for me. And so we have a really good percentage of our instructors that are alumni. They graduate and they come back and they give back to the students, and so they kind of perpetuate that.
I've kind of quit asking that question now when I'm talking to like a new instructor. Like, where'd you come from? You just graduated from here. Got it. Where were you between here and here?
Yeah,
is kind of is more the dialogue now than anything else, and it's fun to see, and they pour back in, and have them relocate into town now, and so that's fun, and it's fun to watch. And as you probably a good segue for where's WyoTech going? I know we just got done. Well, we're not quite done, but working through the new welding expansion building, kind of welding, but then does advanced diesel, ASM. A lot of components go into it, but that allows you to grow, again, 600 students.
Yeah. And
where does the future take WyoTech?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. The industry, like you mentioned, is thriving right now. The industry partners that we work with that hire our graduates are starved for good people, and so again, we see the opportunity and almost the obligation to continue growing and providing that training so that more students get that training, that more industry can get that need fulfilled. But again, we're lucky enough to be an organization, especially under Jim Mathis's ownership, where we can do that and understand it has to be done in the right way. And so when we talked earlier about best training, best outcomes, best experience, that's where our growth has to lie. It has to lie in preserving those ideals and preserving that vision. And so we have our eye on that growth right now. And one of the big areas that we see is welding. We started a welding program on campus. We kind of just retrofitted one of our shops where we had some space, and got that going in April of last year.
So it was sold out.
So yeah, it's been going for about a year, and currently it is sold out through April of 2026. So we have 29 welding booths, and the demand was such that we don't do any other night classes except for this welding class, because people just want it. They're knocking down the door, and they said, okay, we can do a night shift with welding, and so we have 29 day and 29 night students. So just under 60 students that are going to that program, and again, it's sold out through April of next year, and would be further, but we just haven't opened classes that far out. So yeah, we're super grateful for the partnership that we had with you guys and with the city, that's kind of led us down this road of potentially receiving some grant and loan funding that will really open the door for us to do this new welding expansion. And as we thought of, okay, we're going to spend this money on doing a welding building, we thought, well, hey, we're putting up a building, so there's a need in heavy duty diesel equipment, there's a need in our advanced diesel program, there's a need in our business management program for some additional growth and things like that. And so, hey, why not combine those things and make this building a little bit bigger? And so again, the partnership that we've had with you guys and with the city and with the Wyoming Business Council, that we're kind of down the road with in trying to get that approval, is open the doors for us to expand that out a little bit bigger and get to a place where we have property that's directly across the street from where we're at right now.
Ultimately going to be a giant campus.
Yeah, and fill that up in the right way, you know, in the right timing, and make that the premier destination for trades. You know,
Yeah.
people come from all over to go to this place where you know you're going to get the top training, you know you're going to get the best experience, and you know that if you work hard you're going to get a great outcome on the backside. And so, like you said, that's step one in increasing our capacity, 600 plus students, and you know, continuing that growth trajectory. And then in the future we hope to continue to build here in Wyoming and make that the best destination trade school campus that anybody would think of.
Which I love as a vision for our community and the growth, and you guys partner in on, I think people know about you know, some of the things you partner in, like we talked about, the students are always first volunteer. There's volunteer opportunity. I think you know, you guys contribute to about everything that goes on in town, in a kind of philanthropic way. But I think what people don't get to see is the way you give back of, you know, your time and efforts, and you know, maybe not being the point guard of our city league team, but you know, the time and efforts of the staff that go back into other causes they care about. And you know, whether that's you know, David Decker from your outfit is involved in our leadership, and we've got various other people from your organization that are involved in our organization and other organizations around town that help those grow and thrive, which is really the meshing of where those culture elements that you guys talk about on campus. I just want you to know that we as a community feel them off campus too, of how do we make sure that as those kids are having the best experience, they're plugged in to learn about giving back into a community. As they're getting that best education, they have those opportunities to, you know, to interact here in town and take it somewhere else. And you know, that's just a big part and great partnership of the organization.
And thank you, and appreciate hearing that. And it, you know, it's definitely something that we focus on, and you know, take a lot of pride in trying to connect our students to the community, but also be a good community partner ourselves. And again, with a perpetual freshman class, that's always a challenge of educating people and connecting them with the community. But it's super important to us that these students that are coming in from all over the place understand that they're citizens of Laramie and of Wyoming while they're here, and we really do try to get them involved. And it's great to hear that the support is seen out there and the connections are seen out there, because that's something that we take pride in.
Well, we're anxious to be a partner with you as you continue to grow and work on housing and the issues that constrain growth in Laramie. So appreciate it, and appreciate you coming in today, Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. It's always
Right
a pleasure.
On.